This morning, we're taking a deeper dive into the conversation around subsidy, the issues affecting Nigeria's, how that issue is affecting Nigeria's economy and governance. Today, we're shining the spotlight on the subsidy regime, a contentious issue that has sparked intense debate and controversy. In a surprising move, the federal government has reinstated subsidy payments through the Nigerian Petroleum Company Limited. And the decision has raised eyebrow, with many questioning the rationale behind it. For some, they are asking, is this a strategic economic move or a political maneuver? What implications will it have on the Nigeria's already strained finances and the petroleum industry reforms? Joining us in the studio this morning is Sowunmo. I hope I got that correctly. Sowunmo Olabode. He's an energy expert. He's also the editor-at-large of Energia today and Chief Executive Officer of Cabtree Limited. He would dissect the subsidy regime saga, exploring, the motivations and consequence, and of course, potential solution. But before we kick off with the discussion segment, Sagir Ibrahim is standing by with a backgrounder.
In his inaugural address on May 29, 2023, President Tinubu announced the removal of the petrol subsidy to alleviate a significant financial burden on the government. However, this move has led to what many have described as increased hardship for Nigerians, contributing to rising prices for goods and services. Well, recently, Nigerians have been contending with price fluctuations, which have led to increased pump prices and added to inflationary pressures in the economy. Successive governments, including military regimes, have faced opposition to the increase of fuel price and even subsidy removal. The Goodluck Jonathan administration, for instance, attempted to remove subsidy payments in 2012, raising fuel prices from 65 naira per litre to 141 naira per litre, a 116.92% increase. The Jonathan administration later yielded to pressure, reducing the pump price of PMS from 141 naira to 97 naira per litre, marking a 31.21% drop. In 2015, President Jonathan further reduced the price of PMS from 97 naira to 87 naira per litre, an additional 10.31% decrease. Well, in 2016, with the arrival of President Muhammadu Buhari, the price of PMS increased from 87 naira per litre to 145 naira per litre, a 66.67% jump. This increase was a response to global oil market fluctuations, which impacted the transportation cost at the time. The Buhari administration later raised the PMS price to 195 naira per litre, a 124% increase from the initial 87 naira per litre. Amidst controversy over the federal government stopping subsidy payments in June 2023, the PMS price in Nigeria saw a significant jump from 195 naira per litre to 557 naira per litre after President Tinubu announced its removal during his inauguration address, an increase of 185.6% from the previous administration's price. The price later rose to 617 naira per litre later in the year 2023. The Tinubu administration has been embroiled in controversy, with stakeholders continually accusing the federal government of paying subsidies through the back door, a claim it has denied. However, reports regarding the President's directive to the Nnpcl Limited on utilizing the 2023 dividends due to the Federation for subsidy payments have been denied by the Nnpcl Limited. However, this decision comes amidst ongoing petrol shortages in the country, which is worsening transport woes for Nigerians.
All right, thank you there, Sagir Ibrahim, for that quick breakdown of everything and how the subsidy, how the fuel price and pump price had increased over time from different regimes.
Good morning.
Good morning.
And it's a pleasure to have you join us again.
Always a pleasure to be here.
It doesn't look like you're impacted by this first subsidy. You have this smile that is similar to what the president had when he welcomed this new baby presidential jet on the fleet. He was all smiles, all radiating with some kind of joy. You wouldn't know that people are picking leaves to survive in this country.
Well, I think when it comes to the issues of life, it's first all about perspective. And it's the Americans that say the glass is either half empty or half full. And it's whether it's even the career of a person, whether it's even if you are living in the US. I mean, it first begins with perspective. If they say attitude determines altitude, if there's any time it's going to be true, it's going to be true for us now. But to the issues, I think first and fundamentally, one of the things that has not been fully grasped is the dynamics of subsidy and how it relates to the petroleum products. Because irrespective of whatever the government says, there are certain fundamentals that we should know as a people, as individuals, that will keep us informed, that will keep us balanced, and that will enable us to make constructive and proper contributions, whether it be criticisms or praise. Because many times, or at different times, both are necessary in the course of progress. Now, subsidy to begin with is an economic principle, and it is applied across all industries in every nation of the world in different places. There are food subsidies to farmers in the US. There's diesel subsidy by the US to their farmers to ensure that food is produced. There is export subsidy by China. One of the reasons why Chinese goods are so cheaply is that they are subsidized by the government. And there are a number of things that happen. In the 80s, when subsidies were introduced by the Babangida administration, one of the intent was for us to have a cushion in terms of filling it, but more importantly, so that people can have something to spend. There can be more money spent in it. But like many other things that make up the Nigerian system, it got corrupted. It got corrupted with corruption in its full essence. And what was ordinarily supposed to benefit the people started to be a cancer that was eating into the finances of government, thereby hindering government itself from critical spending, such as infrastructure, education, health, and that had been a dilemma all over the years. Basically, the intention, or at least the apparent intention when the government removed the subsidy, was to make available funds for critical running of government, for development of infrastructure, and running the business of progress. However, one of the things that was not clearly understood by everyone is that refined products is determined and affected by dollar rate.
That's right.
So at the point that it was withdrawn, that was the exact amount of subsidy that was withdrawn. But the moment that the naira fell to the dollar, there was a delta in terms of the price at which the product was coming in at the price that it was being sold.
All right. And I'm happy with that intro because it sort of lays the background to what the kind of conversation I would like us to have this morning. And I'm happy that in your opening remarks you talked about some of the dynamics that are not exactly obvious to everybody. But you would think that the people in government who have been in this business of subsidy for the longest would understand these dynamics. It does appear that in the mood to fix this country overnight, we took on way too many reforms at the same time. Reforms with far-reaching impact on just about every sector. Subsidy reforms on the one hand, and the currency reforms on the other. And we have always known, because this is a 90% import-dependent economy, that whatever happens to the dollar has a spiral effect on everything. Was it a question of the government damning the consequences, or the moment we had to jump to realize the depth of the hole?
Okay, so I'm not an economist, I'm an engineer. I mean, I do some amount of economics when it comes to energy economics and all that, so I cannot speak to the overall economic concept. But I can give this analogy which informs my own thinking and my own understanding of the... If you have a patient that has, say, measles, the measles will come with temperature.
That's right.
It will also come with maybe vomiting. It may come with insomnia, the inability to speak. The ability to sleep. It may come with the inability to even eat, which is first essential for the person to be able to take the drugs. So in such a case, you don't just give Panadol, and you don't just give a sleeping pill. So there are probably like 4 or 5 things, medications that the patient must take, and must take them around the same time for the thing to work. Because if you give only the drug, the antibiotics that attacks measles, you may find out that temperature rise can actually make the patient to faint.
Or convulse.
You understand? And then if the eating is not handled, you could have complications when the food gets in. So sometimes there's a need. I want to believe that it is probably the thinking that given the myriad of issues that were bedeviling the nation, they felt that there was a need to put all these issues pari passu. Reforms are always difficult. And I'm not saying that as an excuse, and I'm saying that as somebody who has studied reforms as an impact of energy increase across nations, be it in China, where people died as a result of reforms, or in the UK. The UK, between the end of the Second World War up until the late 70s, when Margaret Thatcher came in, was going through different issues. You will recall that in the early 70s, we were doing economically better than even the UK. And those who went to, I remember my mother going to the UK back then, and where our currency was higher. It was Margaret Thatcher that introduced reforms. The same privatization we are talking about. She privatized British Steel, she privatized all of that. There were many people who lost jobs, and there were also people who committed suicide. The same thing, in fact, when Margaret Thatcher died, there was a man who was on TV who said he lost his job with British Rail in the 80s as a result of the policies of Margaret Thatcher. And it went on and on. Labaste now, he practically ended her life and all that. And the interviewer asked him a question: why didn't you get another job? So I'm not, please don't get me wrong, I'm not trying to, I have really no business with the government. They have enough machinery to defend themselves. What I'm just saying is that reforms in and of themselves has its issues, but it is also incumbent upon government to be able to give regularly the expected impact of the reforms and an estimated time of turnaround. Because I was in Australia a bit during the 2006 global meltdown when there was financial crisis.
2008.
Almost every Australian became an economist, because every day the Minister for the Economy, the various aspects of government will come about and explain what the issues were and expected returns. So people were speaking to the issues and all that. So, like I said, if we come down to the fundamental that brought us here, which is the dynamics of the subsidy. As at today, based on the exchange rate, the price of petrol as a commodity in the international market is a little like 930 naira. It should be understood that whether we refine or not, there are certain costs that are basic.
That's right.
The cost of crude oil as a commodity is basic. It doesn't matter whether you refine it in Congo, in my village, or in the moon. You buy crude, and crude oil is a commodity, like cotton, like gold. And one of the characteristics of commodities is that they tend to have a uniform price. So there are some crude oil which are sweet, and some which are sour. A bit of price differential, but nothing really significant. A refinery is a machine. It's going to cost something to operate. The cost of operation is universal. So it's like you are building a house. Whether you build it in Abuja or you build it in my village, the difference is the cost of the land. You're going to buy brick, you're going to buy cement, and you're going to provide labor. So those are the main difference that is going to come when you start refining locally is the cost of transportation.
Okay.
And it's not a very significant cost. It doesn't take too much intelligence to put it into Google and say, what is the cost of transporting finished product or even crude oil or anything between Europe and here? You see the average when it comes to per barrel. What is the cost of refining global average for a barrel of crude oil, you see the cost, and you see that these are so. When these costs, which are universal, tend to apply, as long as there's fluctuation in the dollar rate, whether it's produced here or not, it's going to have certain effects. So what has happened with us is that we have not monitored it, because the day that the dollar changed, subsidy began, irrespective of whether it is announced or not. So what the government did not do was have the political will, given the issues that people were facing, to start to announce that this is the current reality. Okay. That was just basically what happened.
Okay, I'm glad you broke it down this way now. You've touched a bit on transparency on the part of the government and not educating Nigerians properly on such policies and reforms. Now, talking about reforms and this current subsidy that is like you said, the reality at the moment, what could they have done differently to probably cushion the effect a tad bit on Nigerians? Because it seems like it was a lot at the same time and it's really hitting people a lot.
Well, there are a number of things that can be done, but it may not necessarily have the kind of effects that Nigerians are having. You know, whether you're a princess, or you're a whore, or you're a tramp, everybody goes through labor the same way. It's not like the child of the president or the princess to the king goes through labor differently. Reforms are reforms. It's like a reform in your career. If for any reason you need to add additional education to what you're doing now, get an MBA or a PhD, you're going to wake up in the night. You are going to read when you have a headache and when you're sick. You are going to do certain things. One of the things that the government has not done is to educate properly, which is a communication issue. Because you see, educated people are easier to lead and more difficult to drive. It is the fact that we have knowledge and the fact that the things are being done like they're trying to drive us that is mainly the conflict and the source of the protest. Corporate communications, whether it be a private organization or a public institution, is a management function. But we have not taken communications in the level that it should be, because we have not gone through the crisis of evolution that the more developed world have done it. By basic definition, corporate communication is all the efforts that you put into place to bridge the gap between the wanted perception and the current perception. So there's a perception that government has with the people, in terms of their reforms, in terms of their activities. There is also a perception that they want the people to have in terms of the realities of what they say. Bridging the two is where communication comes in. There needs to be some kind of capsules, all these key issues, fundamental issues, broken down into capsules that needs to be discussed at town halls. There's a reason why the Americans have town halls. There's a reason why the British have town halls, which they did when they were colonizing us. What they do there is that they can take, like in the 80s, when Reagan also did reforms in the US, they would take a particular reform, say a reform in agri subsidies. They will bring it to a village of 50 people and bring people from the state, from the city, from Washington, and discuss it there. And they will break it down to the language of the people and they will discuss it. Nothing stops the government, particularly the orientation agency, who has this kind of mandate, to break down the fundamentals in all the different languages and take it to a town or local government office in all the 776 local governments and begin to talk to people. Because you see, it is goals that enables people to endure. Why were we reading 7 hours, 6 hours in the university? Because we had a goal that we wanted to graduate.
All right.
So if people do not see the goal, it becomes difficult to endure the process.
I like the way you stitch the thoughts, but where I would have to part views with you is in the manner of the communication, especially the honesty in the communication. And as a student of communication myself, one of the fundamental problem I see with communication as we deliver them in this part of the world is we have very little respect for feedbacks. And it is only feedback that helps you to evaluate whether what you are churning out is getting the intended results or not. And more importantly, whether or not you need to modify the communication or even change strategy. What we see is it suggests that we are being talked to as people who don't have input around the strategy to solve this problem. As people, the communication seem like we have a complete idea of what the solutions are. Just trust us, rather than we think this is a solution, but we'd like to hear how to go about it. And what has happened is we have undertaken way too many reforms. And I like the analogy you use with the hospital, you know. And I was saying that last night in relation to this topic. You've got a man who requires a surgery, but he has underlying problems. He's got BPs, he's got blood sugar levels and all of that, and that must be stabilized before that life-saving operation would happen. And so you do thorough examinations, you start isolating the issues and taking care of them, not necessarily as a primary problem, but to be able to take care of a primary problem. Did this government evaluate the impact of that Forex harmonization policy and the pass-through effect, especially on subsidy? At the time, when we moved from 180-something to 400, there was a big shout, and then to 500, and then to 600, and today we are doing 950, 1,000 on the average on filling stations. Did you think the government took out time to study what the implications could be and what they could do to cushion these implications to continue to buy? Because this government woke up and said, we are taking this off. And when people shouted, he said, we will have buses that will come cheaper. It's 1 year down the line. The buses are not there. When the food security problem became an issue, the insecurity didn't start with his administration. There were talks around opening borders or importing food to cushion food inflation, which was the worst. We've gone through this kind of tides before, but people could afford food. Now people couldn't. Inflation is at 33%, food inflation at 40 point something. Do you think this government is doing enough listening to do the kind of adjustment that are necessary to keep people alive? Because at the end of the day, the reforms are for the people. But if the reforms will kill people before its intended result, then you begin to wonder whether they are needed at all. So what is your reading of how this government has gone about reform with regards to harvesting feedbacks from people and modifying as we travel along this route?
So you're asking me a question that belongs to the Minister of Finance. First of all, I'm not a part of the government. So whether the government is listening or not, your guess is as good as mine. The second part is that I'm largely an energy person. And I just tried to do an analogy the other time based on my own understanding.
That's right.
And my understanding can be wrong. Because I always say this, especially when experts on matters are offering their opinions and other people are contributing. You see, logic has its place, but logic does not replace knowledge. And a simple example is this, and that's where expert knowledge sometimes are difficult to question. So all solids, all liquids, when they become solid, they shrink. That's logical, and because it follows. But there are exceptions. One of that is water. When water solidifies, it expands. That's why when you put water in the freezer, the bottle breaks. If you put it in a glass bottle, it breaks. It's called in science the anomalous expansion of water. It is a phenomenon that people can't explain, but it happens with water. So if an expert, if you were not familiar with the day-to-day activities and an expert was saying that, okay, this water, as far as it's concerned, when it solidifies, is going to expand, and so we need to make these adjustments. Somebody who is not necessarily an expert, but who is familiar you understand, has a bit of knowledge with this and says, no, it's impossible. What you are telling us is not correct. I mean, you understand, and starts to marshal his arguments based on the logic. He will sound logically correct, but he will be factually wrong. So that is why for some of these things, experts' views are precisely that. They are expert views. It takes an expert to be able to unearth the basics of all this. But what I can say in all of this, or what I can see in terms of it, is that there is a dearth of communication, which is not necessarily maybe on purpose. It's also because this kind of situation has never really arisen. Most governments they tend to be very autocratic and kill and pray. So we have not really gotten to the stage where government needs to effectively communicate in the energy that the people are communicating. So that capacity needs to be developed by government agencies and the related. There is a communications person for each government place, but they are not necessarily doing their job.
All right. I wish we had the time in the world to continue to delve into this issue. I like the fact that the answers are a bit objective, or rather objectives, and seem to, want to understand the thinking behind the action of everybody as far as this issue is concerned. We have been talking with an expert in this industry. He's the Chief Executive Officer of Cabtree Limited, and also the Editor-at-Large of Energia today, Mr. Olabode Sowunmo. It's a pleasure to have you.
The pleasure is
always.
Thank you for joining us.
Thank you, madam.
All right, and you have a great day ahead. All right, we will take a quick breather. When we return, we'll be serving you stories that made it to the front page of select newspapers this morning. You don't want to miss it.